Hello and welcome to another HTML tutorial. In this tutorial we will going to learn working with HTML forms. So in this tutorial, as we are learning about HTML form elements, we are also learning about HTML5 form elements. So for now, we did this example in our last tutorial in which we covered field set and legend. So now we will going to work with some more form elements. One of the other form elements, which is an old one but used by a lot of developers, is the label. Now when you use label, again, it is only for formatting the document, proper formatting. And one of the reasons the label is used so that you can associate the labels with certain form elements. In order to do that, we usually use a for clause. And this for clause allows us to add this readability factor of which label is associated with which form element. So for example, this label that I have for the first name is associated with F name. So I'm going to add this for. So similarly, I'm going to do that for L name. Now, after that, I can repeat the same process for the highest degree and the number of years of experience. Next, I have introduced another item called state with a label and an input box so that we can try a couple of HTML properties. One of the HTML property is called size. The size property will only going to control the number of visible letters at any given time. For example, in this case, the size will going to be set to 2 letters, but you can enter more than 2. If you want to fix the size to 2 letters, then you have to use another property called max length. So now this will going to limit your size to 2 letters alone. Now let's test this. So here is my state. If I enter NY, it takes the 2 letters, but if I try to enter any more letters, it will not gonna take it. So that's what the max length property is used for. Another property that was introduced in HTML5 is the placeholder property. So placeholder property allows you to put some default text in the box, which is not a value of the box. So as soon as you start typing in the box, that text automatically disappears. As soon as the box becomes empty, the text is brought back. Prior to the placeholder attribute, we used to write some very, very complex JavaScript code to do that. Let me show you the difference between the two. For example, in the value property of state, if I enter NY for New York, now let me show you how it appears. You notice that New York appears in darker text color. And if I replace it and put something else in its place, and I replace that Wisconsin out, New York does not come back. So in order to fix this, what we have done is in HTML5, we have this property called placeholder. And if I put the text New York in placeholder, now let me show you how this functions. So New York is written but not in as dark of a text color as it was written in the value property. If I decide to replace New York, I don't need to because the New York is not a value. I can't even select it. However, if I start typing, let's say if I type IL for Illinois, the New York automatically disappears. But if I ever decide to delete Illinois, the New York comes back. So the placeholder is an extremely beautiful property that has been given to us in HTML5 to give us the temporary text. Sometimes people use it in the phone number fields, in the zip code field. For example, let me show you. Now, here we go. Here are a couple of examples. One is the example of a phone. So this is my text box. The name is phone, the ID is phone, and this is the text in the placeholder. Similarly, I have zip code. It is also a text type element. The name is zip, the ID is zip, and the placeholder is N for 5 digits. So now when I run this in a browser, notice in phone number I get to see this format, and the zip code I get to see this format. This is a way for me to tell the people that this is the value that I'm expecting here. And a lot of the people have started using placeholders. For example, if you go to Outlook.com, remember we used to have a label to the left for the username? Now we have a placeholder that says email, phone, or Skype. Similarly, if you go to the gmail.com, notice the text email or phone, that is also coming through a placeholder. So a lot of these companies have started rolling out the placeholder and have stopped using the label in place. So we used to use labels before, now we have started using these placeholders instead. Next, we're going to learn about another form element called a checkbox. So in order for us to create a checkbox, if you notice, the structure is very similar to that of a text. Instead of using type equals text, we use type equals checkbox. Now, I can have many checkboxes. Here I was able to create 5 checkboxes. Each checkbox has a degree option to it. If you noticed, I named them the same, but values are different. The reason I named them the same, because when I was going to submit this form to the server side or to the JavaScript, if I have a bunch of items that are named the same, they are treated as an array. For those of you who know programming, you know what an array is. Array is a collection of values that can all be referred to by the same name, and there are different placeholders for each value. So I can pass many things at the same time. Generally speaking, you would not use checkbox for this particular example. However, in some cases you may want to use it, but I just used it to show you the checkboxes. And then I was going to change these to radio buttons so that you can also see how easily checkboxes can be changed to radio buttons. Now let me run this program. So now as I ran it, you will notice that these are all the checkboxes and I can check multiple checkboxes. But of course, I created it originally to show you the difference between a checkbox and a radio button. Now in a radio button, you will going to, instead of using checkbox, you will rather call it radio. Now after I make this change, I will going to keep it the same name across the board, because the radio buttons allow you to only pick one of the many choices, and that's the whole point of using a radio button. So now when I run this, I want to pick only one of the many. And that is why I can only choose one of the many choices. If I give my radio buttons different names, then it would allow me to choose all of them, and that's something that I don't want to do. So that is why the radio buttons must have the same name. Now here comes the number of years of experience. I created a text box for this particular item before, but now I would like to change this into a drop-down box. In order for us to create a drop-down box, we do not use input type equals text. Rather, we use what we call select. We can give it the same name, the same ID, no big deal, but I will going to have a select block. In select block, I can have the drop-down list, so for each item in the list, we're going to refer to it as an option. So now when you pick an option, there is a value that goes behind the scene to the server side, and then there's a value that gets to be displayed to the user. So the 0 in place as a value for value property, that is a value that will be submitted to the server. But 0 over here is the value that will be shown to the user. Okay, now let me copy and paste this for additional values. Now that I've created the select box, the width of this box will going to be equal to the longest item in the selection, which apparently is more than 5. Let's test it. So here we go. Number of years of experience. 0, 1 to 3, 3 to 5, more than 5. So this is how the list appears, and as you can see, the width of this box equals the longest item, the widest item in the list. So that's how you go about creating a drop-down box. We will also go to learn how you go about creating a list box, which allows you to see multiple items and also allow you to select multiple items. But that's all for now for today from this tutorial. Next time when we are back, we will going to learn about a lot of other HTML elements and HTML5 elements. Hope you would have enjoyed this tutorial.